Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the ongoing impact of the war in Iran on the global economy, and more importantly, some very concerning developments that have emerged over the last 24 hours regarding potential attacks on critical energy infrastructure across the whole of the Middle East. Because what we are now looking at is not just an escalation in this regional conflict, this is something much bigger. This is now a situation that is sitting right on the edge of a cliff, and if we go over that edge, the consequences could be absolutely enormous, not just for the Middle East, but for the entire global economy in 2026. And the reason for this is very simple. We are now less than 24 hours away from a deadline that could change everything. But before we get into the details on that, could I just ask anybody that hasn't subscribed yet to please hit that subscribe button? It really does help me with the algorithm. On Saturday, Donald Trump issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran, and the terms of that ultimatum were very clear. Iran must immediately stop threatening and attacking shipping in the Strait of Hormuz and provide guarantees that vessels can pass through safely without interference. And if Iran does not comply, the United States has said that it will begin targeting Iranian power infrastructure, starting with the largest power stations in the country. Now that is a very significant escalation, because up until now, most of the conflict has been focused on energy production, shipping and military assets. But this would represent a direct attack on civilian infrastructure, the electricity grid, which underpins the whole Iranian economy. And Iran has responded. And its response is what has really escalated this situation to a completely different level. Iran has said that if the United States attacks its power infrastructure, it will retaliate by targeting energy and water infrastructure in countries that are supporting the USA. Now, who are those countries? Well, we're talking about nations across the Gulf region that host US military bases or are closely aligned with Washington. So that includes Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, and potentially parts of Iraq. So what we're now looking at is the very real possibility of a coordinated attack on energy infrastructure across multiple countries in the Middle East. And this is where things start to become extremely serious, because when you hear energy infrastructure, most people immediately think about oil and gas. But actually the most critical piece of infrastructure in the region is electricity, because electricity powers everything. If you take out power stations, you don't just turn off the lights, you effectively shut down the entire economy. Businesses cannot operate, factories stop producing, transport systems break down, hospitals are forced onto backup generators, financial systems, communications, logistics, everything becomes disrupted. And the immediate impact of that is economic collapse at a local level. Companies stop generating revenue, employees can't go to work, wages stop being paid, and within days you start to see severe economic contraction. But that's only the first layer of the problem. Because in the Middle East, electricity is not just important, it is absolutely vital for survival. Because of water, much of the Middle East is extremely hot, extremely dry, and has very little natural water resources. So instead, countries rely heavily on desalination. And a desalination plant is a facility that takes seawater and removes the salt and impurities to produce clean, drinkable water. And it's a highly energy-intensive process, which means it relies entirely on electricity. So no electricity means no desalination, and no desalination means no water, and no water means no life. So if power infrastructure is taken offline across multiple Gulf countries, we're not just talking about economic disruption, we are talking about the potential for a humanitarian crisis affecting millions, possibly tens of millions of people. Because within a very short period of time, water supplies could become severely restricted. Now let's take this one step further, because the Middle East is not just important regionally, it's absolutely critical to the global energy system. This region accounts for a significant proportion of the world's oil and gas production, and much of that supply flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Around 20% of global supplies goes through that narrow shipping lane every single day. Well, it did before this war started. It isn't at the moment because it's effectively closed. So if we have a situation where shipping is restricted or blocked, power infrastructure is being attacked, oil and gas facilities are disrupted, and multiple countries are pulled into this conflict, then we are looking at a perfect storm. Oil production could fall sharply, gas exports could be severely reduced, and global energy markets would go into shock. We've already seen energy prices rising significantly over the past couple of weeks, but if this escalates further, we are not talking about incremental increases, we are talking about extreme moves. Oil prices could surge to levels that we have never seen before. Gas prices could spike even higher than the peaks we saw during the European energy crisis at the start of the war in Ukraine. And the result would be global shortages, because supply chains would not be able to adjust quickly enough. So what does that mean for the global economy? Well, energy is the foundation of everything. If energy prices rise sharply, it increases costs for businesses across every single sector. Manufacturing becomes more expensive, transport becomes more expensive, food production becomes more expensive, and those costs get passed through directly to consumers, so inflation rises. At the same time, economic activity slows down because businesses cut back, consumers reduce spending, and investment declines. So you end up with the worst possible combination: rising inflation and falling growth. And that's exactly the definition of stagflation. And if this situation escalates into a full-scale infrastructure war across the whole of the Middle East, then a global recession in 2026 becomes a very real possibility. Now let's come back to the key issue here. Will Iran comply with the ultimatum set by Donald Trump? And the answer, based on everything we've seen so far, is no. Iran has already indicated that it will not provide blanket guarantees for all shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Instead, it is said that friendly nations will be allowed to pass. But any countries aligned with the United States or supporting Western actions may face restrictions or attacks. So effectively, Iran is not going to meet the demands that have been set, which means the next question is the critical one. Will Donald Trump follow through on this threat? Because if the United States does begin attacking Iranian power stations, then we are almost certain to see retaliation, and not just limited retaliation, but a broad escalation targeting infrastructure across the region. And once that starts, it will become very difficult to contain because each side responds to the other and the situation spirals. And that's why I said at the beginning of today's video that we are standing on a cliff edge, because over the next 24 hours we are likely to find out which direction this goes. Either there is some form of de-escalation, or we move into a completely new phase of this conflict, one that directly targets the foundations of modern economies: electricity, water, oil and gas. And if that happens, then the consequences will not be limited to just the Middle East. They will be felt across the entire world, through higher energy prices, through supply shortages, through inflation, and through slower economic growth. So this is now a situation that everybody needs to be watching very closely, because the decisions that are made over the next 24 hours could define the direction of the global economy for the rest of this year and possibly beyond. So I'll keep you posted on any significant news and developments as soon as they occur. Hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, or maybe you didn't quite like it, but you thought it was interesting, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Don't forget, I'm currently running my competition where you can win my property or a cash alternative prize. Got some really exciting deals on the go at the moment, so please check that out if you'd like to support the channel. Thank you so much to everyone that supported me in other ways. If you've bought me a coffee or sent me YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, thank you so much for that support. It really does help to keep me going. And here's something to put a smile on your face.